So what happens now is, and what we joked at the beginning is that silver and gold prices and food will move together because people are going to try to hedge this. Energy is leading. So 2020 is going to look a lot like 2008, and it's going to look like the year 2001.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today, Bob Kudla, tradelikeagenius.com. When we spoke in our pre-interview here, I think the name of this thing might be Silver and Food Go Together. So in our last iteration when we were talking, it was more about how the end of the year is starting to come in with higher food prices, what we're trying to think about for the future here in 2020, some of the ideas, how we both see the economy, civilization cycle, as well as other larger cycles in the heavens, literally coming to fruition, things we haven't seen since the 1400s. I want to talk about the Great Conjunction today, tectonic movements, as we're starting to see more earthquakes across Western United States. Cascadia is always going off during grand solar minimums. So you have to ask yourself, how much do these intertwine between tectonic events, heavenly celestial events, and then our lives here on Earth, and then that further dissected into the economy cycle in itself, which has different cycles that overlap on top of cycles. So where's the true value in your skill sets and also things that you can own to get us through this next year? Because I'm going to stick with it. I'm staying with my prediction. I stay with it. I will not deviate from this at all. 2021 is the year that everybody wakes up to this grand solar minimum conundrum that we're facing in 2021 harvest season. So we have from then until now, that amount of time until everybody's awoken. And then what happens? How's the world going to move from there? So Bob, I appreciate you coming on today. TradeLikeAGenius.com. I'm going to leave all the links in the description box below. If you want to learn how to trade, follow Bob. I'll let you explain what you have for different trigger algorithms and different automated ways that you can take advantage of movements in the market with just simple buy and sell orders that come to you either through text, or you can actually watch it through TradingView live on the screen there. But we're going to try to run through a bunch of topics today for the next hour. Bob, the floor is yours. Thanks for joining me. TradeLikeAGenius.com. If you've never traded before and want to take advantage of these types of profits every day in the market, I urge you to sign up for one of many Trade Genius online educational courses. Use the promo code HOLIDAY for 50% off non-bundled items. Crypto, options, ETFs, and the traditional markets. And on to the interview with Bob Kudla from TradeLikeAGenius.com.
Thanks for having me, Dave, and Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
Yeah, you as well. Thanks. I hope everybody's having a happy holiday. It's been an abundant year, and I'm so happy and thankful we have food right now. See, it's the little things that can make your life incredible, or whatever the way you want to take it. But having that much food around the table and wine and, just desserts and things that we take for granted now. I don't know if it's going to be here in a couple of years, but enjoy now.
Yeah, count your blessings every day. So we at Trade Genius, this is what we're seeing. I'm going to give you the 2020 through 2021 view here. So let me just monologue here, if I may.
Please.
Is that what we're going to see here, and we're seeing it already. If you guys notice, since the 9th of December, gold and silver have lifted. And that's the big money positioning for the new year. Gold and silver has been suppressed since the 2011 kind of a blow-off they had. And they've been pushing it down. 2016 was the restart of the cycle. And so now we're calling this the fourth inning. And so through 2020, you're going to see the metal prices lift. And, our thoughts going into 2020 was that silver was going to hit 20 by the end of the year. Now it's at 18.5, closing in on 20. It may or may not get there by next week, but we've had really big moves here in the last 3 or 4 days. But silver will be over $20 to $21 sometime in 2020, and gold's going to be over. It's going to get over 2,000. So we're going to get some good pushes here in the metals. And when I talk gold and silver, I automatically assume platinum and palladium are going to go with it. Those are the Those are the four precious metals that we follow, and And so we're in and out of trading the miners of those metals because that's where the leverage is. And that's where retail, that means normal people can participate in this rally. So the reason why these things are moving are twofold. One is that the central banks from around the world, including our Federal Reserve now, are starting to throw liquidity at the markets like there's nobody's business. Well, the stock market itself is pretty overvalued right now, but silver and gold and the precious metals have not made their big moves yet. So money's starting to leak into there. And the second thing that's happening, Dave, is that countries like India are buying gold and silver to hedge the increasing cost of energy that's starting to show up. Oil prices, nat gas, gasoline, and countries like India. Watch India. India is a bellwether. It's a developing nation, but they probably would consider it's one of the second tier developed nations. But that country can't feed itself, and that country can't energize itself. And so they're going to run into a situation where their currency may collapse. And so they're panic buying gold, and they're going to try to confiscate gold and silver from their people. For those of you who live in India, you're probably already getting a taste of what they're doing with capital controls and cash controls and taxation on gold and silver and stuff like that. It's going to get worse, but they're not going to be the only nation. So what happens now is, and what we joked at the beginning, is that silver and gold prices and food will move together because people are going to try to hedge this. Energy is leading. So 2020 is going to look a lot like 2008. And it's going to look like the year 2001, where we're rolling off these big cycles. And we're doing unprecedented levels of liquidity now. But once that leaks into food and once that leaks into energy, it's game over for the central banks, because you can't put that genie back in the bottle, because people think that's inflationary, but it's not, Dave. It's actually taxation, which is deflationary. And so you're going to get all these weird things happening in the economy because of energy. And we talked last time, I said 2011 is when last time we had silver and food prices move up together. We had the Arab Spring. This time is going to probably be the worldwide winter, fourth turning kind of stuff. And you're starting to see it now, in the supermarkets. The United States, we are really, really lucky. I do all the food shopping, so I watch this stuff closely. And so far, food prices of the basic stuff is holding. Packaged goods, though, prices have gone up, and they're shrinking. And if you notice, too, one thing that people haven't talked about, watch coffee prices this year. Supply is being outstripped by demand, so coffee is going to become unaffordable. And usually chocolate goes with coffee, so keep an eye on that as well. And then you're going to start to see now soybeans starting to lift, Dave, corn starting to lift. And those are the two that we follow the most, because we have an algorithm that we help our traders trade actually in the futures. There's a product out there called Nadex, which is a binary options kind of play. And you could trade some of these commodities, like you could trade futures, but I call it futures on training wheels. So you're able to buy these spreads that normal people can participate in these futures contracts. And we have an algorithm that's telling us basically at the end of every trading day whether the market is going to lean bullish or bearish, buy or sell it. And then we develop trading ranges for those every day. The sales factor the success factor on those is over 80%. They don't always hit, so you have to trade different things. But when they do hit, they're 8 out of 10 times you're gonna profit from the trade. So we're starting to see. We had a trade last week on wheat that was a winner, and then today we got buy signals on both corn and soybeans. And this is going to be secular. These are, even though we day trade these in this product, we're seeing secular moves. And the other thing that we trade, that I trade all the time, we just got out of a trade on MOS, the ag chem, the potash companies are starting to move too. So, and we talked about that last time as well. When you can't get the food crops to grow fast enough because of the shortened growing seasons, they basically give it adrenaline by putting potash to force the plant to grow fast enough so it can head so they can capture the grains. So we're seeing those things occur, and then the last thing is we also follow DBA, and the other areas that's going to be in a really, really bad way when food prices start to squeeze is the grocery stores will be stocks that you don't want to own because they can't pass the costs on to the consumer faster than the producers are going to impose costs upon them, and they're going to get absolutely squeezed. It's going to be a nightmare scenario, and this happened in 2011 as well, and it happened in 2008. And people don't notice this, but food prices and the stock market tend to go together. And so if you look back at the cycle of the grain prices, they tie pretty closely to the 7-year cycles we've had in the stock market. Now they bastardized this last one. We kind of had a little bit of a hiccup in 2011, the flash crash. So I kind of count that as a 7-year, but you're gonna now, we're at a point now where we're at another 8 years from the last kind of bump in the road. And food prices and energy prices are now spiking. Oil now in the US is almost $62 a gallon. And in the United States, food and energy are relatively inexpensive against what other people in the world pay. We pay higher for other things, but when those things start to move, it's lights out for all the other services that are used in the economy, because we're 70% services, and then it just rolls the whole economy over. So that's what we're thinking about for 2020. So we're absolutely staring at a silver spike, a gold spike, grain spiking, ag chem spiking. It's going to be a perfect storm for commodities at the wrong possible time, when people now are indebted up to their eyeballs everywhere in the world, Dave. China, United States, Europe, Japan, and even the Middle East, with all that oil money, Saudi Arabia is running deficits. So that's why they put their whole big their oil producer out onto the public markets, because they had to raise cash. And then, so probably you're going to see a shooting war in that part of the world. And you're going to start seeing some stress in Canada, and you're going to see stress in India. And China is always perpetually on the edge. I think what's going to happen there is going to probably blow people away because it's been so hidden. But now that Ebola for pigs has now leaked out of China and is leaking across that Belt and Road area. It's starting to show itself up in Eastern Europe and the Western Soviet old bloc, and is leaking down into into Thailand and into Myanmar. And so if that thing happens, there's not going to be enough pigs in the world to feed people.
Yeah, that's true. I've been following China closely. I live there and work there. So for me, it's pretty easy to dig the info, and I know what I'm looking for, specifically with factory output, electrical demand, exports, and these kind of things. That's where my forte is, and I'm really interested because you can get a good indication of how the economy is behaving. They've had the runs on the banks just daily over there. That's not making too much news. So you can get it from local areas, and they try to delete it out of the social discourse. But with all the bond defaults from state-owned enterprises, it's sending some huge signals, like they're letting state-owned enterprises default now. And, I've always looked at China as they're the ones supplying the goods. So if the factory orders stop there, then what's happening from the buy behind? So as using China as the world's factory, if they're not getting the orders, that means people aren't placing the orders. And then you ask, why not? So what's not on tap coming out of their supply chain and their stream? People just simply are not ordering from China like they used to. So that shows me 2 or 3 steps back behind the wholesalers there, that there must be, people they're more careful with their cash. I mean, instinctively, I think most people on the planet are waking up going, something's very, very, very edgy and not correct at the time. Maybe we should just err on the side of caution. And I think that's kind of the vibration that people are feeling out there is, erring on the side of caution, be a little more conservative with your money. You might need it for a rainy day. And some of these articles coming out, in America, only 40% of people in the United States don't have any money at all in the bank, zero, and they're running on credit card debt. But I mean, you can only do that for so long before the card's cut off and you can't even, 40%, that's a scary number that have zero money in the bank, zero savings, zero. Because I ended up talking with, my sister knows a fair few people in the food industry. So I asked her if we could connect over the holidays. And I spoke to a store manager. I won't mention which store chain it was. But we got into this whole conversation about 3 days of food in a city, and he's like, no, 3 days. Yeah, right. It's like our stores have nothing in the back except like bleach and toilet paper, whatnot. In the little what store they do have, it's like everything's out on the shelves. Once it's gone, it's gone. If the trucks don't come, then we're completely out of food. He's like, I think we have about 3 to 4 hours of food, literally, because in the back, toilet paper, yeah, you could buy that for hygiene, but in terms of these trucks rolling into those stores, you got to be ultra careful and really start to think about stocking, not only in getting yourself ready mentally, physically, but these things here financially, as well as food supplies and stocks. And, things moving forward in the market here for this year that are special. And I wouldn't say unprecedented, but just like cycles that are repeating in the market. Fourth Turning, a great book. You must read that if nobody knows what that is. It's a culmination of cycles that are overlapping on an 80-year cycle. But take that out 5 cycles, and then we come into one grand solar minimum cycle. And also this transition of air. We're coming into air right now, and with the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, we haven't seen that since 1402. But if you want to just do the regular transition from the different elements in the, astrological fields there, 200 years is the last time they saw it. 1802 was the last transition. So we're moving into air from a denser medium from Earth into air. So how many times do we see this? 8 in cycles of 200 and cycles of 400, and then we go back in the cycle of 2,000 years. And, a lot of religious texts, and, we're talking about Christmas. So it's really interesting that, the birth of Christ lies right on one of these iterations of 5 cycles of 400 years. Now, what kind of mark in time is this that nobody forgets it? Overriding powerful cycle on top of each other, because a 2,000 year, 2,500 year, 1,500 years, and we see it again and again. And how many times? What were they trying to warn us about with all these changes coming here? And really, financially, you're going to need to be able to buy higher priced food. But if you're living on credit card and you got zero savings in the bank and you got $25,000 or $50,000 of card debt, you're going to starve. Literally, you're going to starve. Nobody's going to help you either. And, the best way we can look at it is Venezuela has food, but they're exporting it. When hungry people starving to death coming up to the front of the farms, guys with guns in their faces waving, going, get out of here. This is our food. You're not coming in here. I don't care if you're starving to death with your children. You're not getting our food. It's for export. It's for money. The way that we're going to help people is I think it's going to shock the amount of people that are not going to get helped. And you're going to ask yourselves why. And you can see all the signs on the wall right now. So how do you get yourself financially prepared? And what do we see happening with the Bitcoin halving? And specifically what you're doing on TradingView with the signals that I'm seeing. You got the buy sell. You talked about Nadex with the binary options as well. But then you got the whole crypto signal out there. You got the regular traditional markets. So maybe I was just rambling too much coffee, but I think you could hit a couple of those points there. I'm really curious, the Bitcoin halving coming up, because we saw the consolidation phase and then the really large jump up these last 2 same halving cycles of Bitcoin.
Yeah, well, the way we look at it is cryptocurrencies is really the vaccination against the banking system, and you have a gold and silver vaccinations against the fiat system, and your own ability to put yourself in a situation of supply is in your hands. For us, it's impossible to keep a year's worth of food. There's very few people that are going to be sitting, on a mountainside in Idaho, but you got to get yourself through at least 3 to 6 weeks without having to rely on an outside source for food and maybe even for water and energy. And so those are the things that people need to think about. Now, if you live in a city, you better have a friend that's outside the city we talked about this before. Chicago had their EBT system, which is basically food stamps, electronic food stamps, went down for one day, and people were rioting in the streets. So people, only think for today. There's always a phrase I used to use when I did these interviews in the past is, it's the parable of the ant and the grasshopper. And governments teach their people to become grasshoppers, and when you need to really become an ant. And because the government wants you to be totally dependent on them, because that's where they derive the source of their power. But they're going to be fundamentally unable to support the population in the time of need. Just today, Dave, in Southern California, we had a storm come through. The snow levels are down to 2,500 feet. It closed the Tejon Pass, the Cajon Pass, the Willows Pass, and every other secondary road that crossed over the Laguna Mountains outside of San Diego County. So essentially, the only way out of Southern California was on the coast road to Santa Barbara, and they had tornadoes coming up into the Ventura Harbor, and they had circulation spinning off into Goleta, and so people were, if this is December, if you talk about what's happening maybe February, March, and we get another cold storm like that, and it shuts these roads down. All our food comes from outside of our little basin here. Amazon has all of their distribution centers sitting just south of Bakersfield, and Safeway and all these other people, because it's cheap land, and they pump those trucks into the basin. But if that doesn't happen, just like you said, it could be a bad scene. And snow's not our biggest worry here. It's more of a novelty. But just this last 3 days, we've had 6 3.5 to 4.0 earthquakes simultaneously across the state along the fault lines. Now, each individual earthquake is not that big of a deal, but that many, that diverse along these fault lines take notice. And on the other side of the Cascadia, Dave, in Vancouver area, they had a 6.3 earthquake on the other side of the Cascadia. Cascadia was kind of quiet. But what's happening in California that people are starting to understand is the San Andreas Fault is growing quiet, but there's a fault behind in the Owens Valley that is waking up. So we've had these earthquakes now. That we had a Landers earthquake, and now we had the Searles Valley earthquake, and basically all of California now is starting to split and move, instead of just a portion of California that everybody always thought would slide off. The rotation now, basically, how Baja California broke away from Maine, California. You have basically the Gulf of California. Well, that whole thing now is becoming a bigger thing. So, that area all the way up to Palm Springs is below sea level. So it won't take much effort or action for water to break through some of these areas and eventually flood that whole basin all the way into Palm Springs. Palm Springs sits like 12 feet under sea level. The farther south you go, you're down to over 100 feet below sea level. It's just the silt from the Colorado River dumping over millennia that have created a blockage for the Gulf to invade into the United States, if you will. Well, that whole area is pivoting west and north, so it's creating a bigger crack. And so it's going to change the geometry of the earthquakes here in California, and we're going to go from less slip strike earthquakes. We're probably going to see more what we call uplift kind of quakes, which are more damaging. And we probably have one in Southern California. There's probably a strike slip or an upthrust fault probably every 7 to 10 miles. You can't avoid it. I live 3 miles from the ocean. 10 miles out is a fault, and 3 miles on the other side of me, I live on a scarp. So on the other side of the hill from my house, just 2 miles, is another fault line. These things will all start uplifting because they won't be able to move north anymore. They're going to be overriding each other, which is going to cause, I think, more significant damaging quakes. If any of those hit in the basin, Dave, it shuts down LA for weeks. and then water, natural gas, all that stuff comes in via these passes. And so that's the thing that people don't really understand. And this is what you've always tied together in your conversations around the Grand Solar Minimum, is that the energy and the gravitational forces change, and it allows the reduction of friction in these rocks, or more liquefaction in these rocks, and they start to move. And so that's something to bear in mind. And I think it's going to be really something that people need to keep an eye on from a longer term perspective. But just getting back to safety for yourself, is that from a stock standpoint, where gold, silver, natural gas, energy, food, that's where you need to be focusing your trading on. Forget the FANG stocks. All those tech companies, all those companies are in the service industry. When things get real, you're going to want to own real. And then from personal, if you can get solar energy on your home, get it on your home, because you can always tie it into a battery backup system in your house, and very easily for you then to just plug in the main things. Like in my house, you only have to have 4 or 5 things to plug in. You want your refrigerator, you want your freezer, and you want your communication systems up and running. And then other than that, LED lights take hardly any energy at all, and you'll be able to function. And then you want to have enough food and water to get you through 3 or 6 weeks if you have to sit in place.
Yeah, let me throw an idea in there. Yeah, if it does come to this where you have a major quake, like, you're going to need a bunch of black plastic trash bags, because you're going to want to seal off all your windows to not allow any light to escape. Because if after 2 or 3 weeks there's a lot of non-functional areas and you're glowing like a Christmas tree, that's going to be a target. So if you're able to keep your light signature hidden during these times, you could be living, and there's like here just behind the black trash bags, and if people went by your house, they would think it's a house without power. It's also just like us. But if you're sending all these signals of, lit up house, must have a water supply, must have electricity, they got something in there we don't have. And, a lot of these scenarios that you read about from X, Y, or Z, when they're trying to see what would happen in one of these collapses or emergencies, it does seem that if you could literally stay in your house and not leave, the bug out thing is a bad thing unless your house is collapsing and sliding into the ocean and you got no choice than to grab your bag and get out of there. Unless it comes to that, where your house is sliding off a cliff and you're actually diving out the window and hoping to get out of there before it slides, you don't want to be bugging out, because everybody else is going to be out there, and then that's just going to be a bad situation. If you can keep yourself in your house for 3 to 4 weeks while everything else around you does its thing, then you're going to just to ride it out as a life raft in your house. Think about it like that.
And we have, we're natural gas for our grills and stuff like that, but we have propane tanks and we have firewood. And so, and you want to get a couple bags of charcoal, and just these little things will mean a lot to you. And I agree with you. You have to stay in place. You know your neighbors, and neighbors know you, and they're less likely to give you harm for people that you've known in the neighborhood for many, many years. I just feel sad for people in the cities. What I call ironic, the progressives that live in these cities are the ones that have the money and the food and the luxury items, and they're living right next to extremely poor people, and they're going to be the first victims of this. And the state wanted to push everybody into cities, their Agenda 21 thing. But in America, if you live in a city, that would be my only exception to the don't bug out rule. Unless you're in a very defendable location, you may want to get yourself out of the city, because I think